Surprise Comics.
In this video, we're tackling the question, is it worth it to have your comic books graded? We're going to go over all the details as much as we can in one video, and wherever there's more information needed, I'll have resources and links for you to dive deeper down that rabbit hole so you can answer this question for yourself. I've been getting a lot of questions recently from people saying, is it worth it to have my comic book collection graded? Which books should I get graded? How do I know which books to get graded? Things like that. And I think this video is chock full of really good examples and solid information to help you answer that question. If this kind of information is helpful to you and you're not already subscribed, please consider doing so. In so doing, if you also like this video and leave a comment down below, you're entered to win this month's giveaway. This is the last video to get in on that giveaway. Every single comment that you leave on a video for that month is an entry into that month's giveaway. I pick a random video, a random comment from that video, and that person is the winner. This month is a CGC Virgin Signature Series Clayton Crane signed comic book, and if you head over to brycecomics.com and sign up for the newsletter over there, you're entered to win a free slab each and every month, and that's also where I send out first notification of new inventory, new collections that come through the shop. Use code COLLECT10 for 10% off. That code is always active. You can also find me over on Instagram where I do trades for grails and have other fresh content over there, and lastly on Whatnot, link in the description for $15 towards your first purchase. We're having a ton of fun over on Whatnot, and I hope to see you there. So the first question that needs to be answered if you're deciding which books to get graded is, what is your objective? And I really see two possible objectives. One is to store, protect, and display. If that's your objective, there's a certain set of criteria you should consider before getting your books graded. The other objective is to increase the resale value of your collection. And there's a completely different set of criteria to consider if your goal is to increase the value. So let's start with store, protect, and display your comics. A lot of collectors just want to keep their comic books safe. And so I want to throw the option out there. If that is your sole objective, is to protect the comic books, you can get about the same level of protection with an archival safe bag and board like Mylar and a full backboard. A thicker backing board and a Mylar case provides a lot of protection for a comic book, because CGC cases and any grading company's cases for that matter don't provide 100% protection of the books. Sometimes they can still move around in the case, especially during shipping, and incur damage, just like a Mylar bag. They both offer about the same level of protection. What it really comes down to is how they're handled, and that's really up to the collector. I see a lot of collectors. There's one dealer on Instagram, every time he does a live sale, he does a preview, and he's got his books all in Mylar, and he pulls it out of the book and he slams it down. He pulls it out of the box and slams it down, pulls it out of the box and slams it down. So it really depends on how you treat the books. If you take your slabs and you slam them down, it's the same thing. So both options provide about the same level of protection for your book. Now, there's the aesthetic appeal of having your books graded. I personally really like the way that books present when they're actually graded versus just putting them in Mylar. And this is a personal preference thing. You could be on either side of the coin, but personally, I like them CGC graded. I think a lot of people really think it makes the book pop, and it just looks a little bit different when it's slabbed in that nice plastic case. So if your sole purpose is to encapsulate just to protect and display, a lot of people say, why not go with a cheaper route? I would advise going against a cheaper grading company. I would stick with CGC for the grading company, and we'll get into more reasons why here. But essentially, there are cheaper options, cheaper grading companies. Some companies offer, a slab that's not even grading it at all. It's just a slab with a label. And that's all fine and great for you, but inevitably, somebody is going to sell your comics. At some point, every single comic book will be sold unless it's in a museum. So if you take them with you to your grave, your children are going to sell those comic books. So you may as well get them graded by the company that's going to have the most resale value, and we'll get more into that here in just a sec. So if the second objective is to increase the value of your comic books, then we really have to dive a little bit deeper to decide which ones are worth getting graded. And first and foremost, like I mentioned just now, I would stick with CGC. And the reason is CGC has the highest resale value for any grading company. It's undeniable. You look at the numbers, you cannot deny that CGC fetches the highest amount for resale value for books. CBCS is a close second, and every other grading company behind behind them, I wouldn't recommend. Now, some people may choose to use those companies for different reasons, but personally, I wouldn't recommend them. The other thing about CGC is their turnaround time and the cost of grading is comparable to every other grading company, and in some cases, it's even better. So it just makes the most sense on paper to use CGC. So there's several steps to take to determine what is worth grading. And the first thing is to know how to estimate the grade of the comics that you're looking to have graded. This is a step that can take the most experience and the most practice. There's no substitute for experience. Submitting books yourself and seeing how the grading process works, you start to hone in the skills of grading stuff. But since I started in comics, CGC just released this new book called the Official CGC Guide to Grading Comics. Now, it's important to note I am not a CGC fanboy by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I get no kickbacks from them. I have plenty of gripes and problems with CGC. If you watch my channel at all, you would know that. But on paper, it just makes the most sense. So this is the new guide that they just came out with, the Official CGC Guide to Grading Comics, and in it is hundreds of pages with picture examples of different defects and how they affect the grade. So if you pick up this book, you'll be, head and shoulders above where I started in comic books with all of this information here. So you couple that with experience, and also I have a bunch of videos, resources here on this channel on how to grade comics. I'll put links in the description for helpful videos on getting more comfortable and familiar with grading comics. I have videos on Silver Age, I have videos on Golden Age, and I have lots of videos on modern comics, especially how to pick a 9.8. So check out those videos, lots of helpful information in those. So once you've estimated the grade of the comic that you're thinking about getting graded, you can look up and estimate the value that that book will have when it comes back from grading. And my advice here is to be conservative, okay? If it's a Silver Age book, conservatively grade it a grade lower and look up the values associated with that. If it's a Bronze or Copper Age book, there's a big tip here. If lots of Bronze and Copper Age books only make sense to get graded if they're a 9.8. And in my experience, books that come out of childhood collections or collections, of just collectors, run completers, a very small percentage of Bronze and Copper Age books get the 9.8, maybe somewhere between 1% and 5%. So if you have to get the 9.8, there's very few Bronze and Copper Age books that actually will get that in most collections. So keep that in mind when you're being conservative. Maybe just don't get that one graded. And if it's a modern book that needs a 9.8, and most modern books do need a 9.8, there's some exceptions to that, to really big, expensive modern keys will even make sense in a 9.0, 9.2, but most modern books, generally speaking, need to get a 9.8, and this is where you really need to master the art of how to choose a 9.8 or be able to know one when you see one. And I've done several videos called How to Choose a 9.8, and piggybacking on that is use pre-screen for modern 9.8. Pre-screen is a service that CGC offers where if you have at least 25 books in the same tier, like 25 modern books, you can set a pre-screen grade like 9.8 and say, if it doesn't hit 9.8, return it to me raw, don't encapsulate it, and charge me an $8 rejection fee. And in most cases with modern 9.8s, I recommend using the pre-screen. So now that you've estimated the grade and now that you've looked up the value, you need to do some simple math. And the simple math is, how much money can you get for the book raw, and how much money can you get for the book graded minus all the fees it takes to get it graded? And this is where you can get really hoodwinked and make some bad decisions if you fail to do that math about the cost it took to get it graded. So let's do a couple examples. Let's say you have a raw book that's worth $20. In its current state, it's worth $20, and the graded value of that same book in a 9.8, let's say it's a modern book, is $80. Okay, so you may think, wow, this makes sense to get it graded. I can get 80 for it graded or 20 for it raw. But if you do the math, you'll see that it doesn't make sense. So you have to subtract from it the cost it took to get it graded. For modern book, let's just say it's about $25 to get it graded. Let's say you had the book pressed and cleaned and that cost you another $15. That's conservative. And I'll get more into pressing and cleaning here in just a moment. Let's say you add to that the shipping, because you have to ship the book to CGC and they have to ship it back to you. Let's say it's $20. The more books you send in the same submission, the lower your shipping cost is going to be there and back. But let's just say it's $20. And if you do the math on that $80 graded book after your fees is also worth $20. And you add to that the risk that the book could come back less than 9.8 or get rejected by pre-screen, and that costs you $8. Now you are in the red for getting it graded, not to mention your time. Okay, so you really have to do this math, play the tape all the way through to see if it's worth it. Let's do another example where it is worth it to have it graded. Let's say it was a Silver Age book, and let's say in its raw form, in its current state, it's worth $50. And that same book graded, say it comes back a 5.0, the 5.0 CGC book is worth $200. This is a pretty accurate example. You see this all the time with raw Silver Age books. So let's do the math. Let's say it costs $40 to have the book graded. It's a different tier. It's just an estimate. Let's say it was $15 to have it pressed and cleaned, and let's say it's $20 for shipping. Now the actual value of that graded book after you subtract your cost to get it graded is $125. So it's $125 graded versus $50 raw. That's more than double the value to have it graded. Now it's worth it, even when you factor in all the time it took for you to get it in that state, which might not be very much time at all if you send it off to someone else to have it pressed, cleaned, and submitted for you. So this is an example where it absolutely makes sense, and this holds true for most Silver Age books in a certain tier, depending on the price that you can actually get the book at. Again, I'm going to go over some examples here in just a moment about some collections that I walked away from where they did both sides of this wrong, and we'll talk about why it didn't work out. So, but before we do that, I want to talk about pressing and cleaning. Unfortunately, I haven't had a good experience with a presser and cleaner except for my buddy Hugh at Grade Bump Comics on Instagram over in Canada. But he's in Canada. He's limited on time, so that kind of limits the amount of stuff that he can take on. So I don't have enough experience and enough good experience with anyone stateside that I feel comfortable recommending, unfortunately. I know there are a lot of pressers out there, and I know there are a lot of people that have had good experiences, and so maybe shoot them a message and see who they recommend. So my recommendation for pressing and cleaning, number one, is learn how to do it yourself. If you have the time to do it, you can learn how to do it yourself. It is not magic. Contrary to popular belief, pressing and cleaning books is not sorcery. It is a skill that is actually relatively easy to learn and to master. Of all the things that I've tried, skills that I've tried in my life, pressing is nowhere near a difficult skill to comprehend. It's really basic stuff. You're talking about basic cleaning techniques, basic pressing techniques. So you can do it, and the setup to get started is relatively inexpensive. It will definitely pay for itself right away. And there's tons of information out there about how to press and clean books. There's tons of information, YouTube videos of people, showing what presses they use and stuff like that. So I hope to one day offer a Bryce Comics pressing and cleaning service, and I hope to take it to the next level and offer an even better service than just pressing and cleaning. But you send us the books and we'll do all of this work for you. Everything we're talking about today, look up the values, look up, is it worth it or not, and have that as a part of the service. I've been trying to hire for that position. I've been offering $30 an hour, but there's two problems. One, the town that I live in, Paradise, California, is a terrible, terrible town. Nobody wants to move here, and that's the biggest problem. But the second problem is most people that have mastered pressing usually start their own side gigs, and so they don't necessarily want to go to work for someone else. But maybe there is someone out there, and for $30 an hour, and it's full time, and you can clock in, clock out. You don't have all the stress of running a business. I think it will happen at some point, but it's just a matter of finding the right person. So now I want to talk about collections that I recently walked away from where they had both sides of the spectrum where they did grading wrong. The first one was a raw book collection where it was 100% raw books. $30,000 was what they were asking, and I have no doubt that there was at least $30,000 in value in those raw books. There was about 9,000 raw books. However, I didn't know how much more than $30,000 was in those raw books. Two of the boxes, there was two short boxes of just keys that would probably be worth getting graded. The two biggest books in the collection was a Giant Size X-Men #1 mid-grade and a Hulk 181 mid-grade. Now the Hulk 181 was missing the Marvel value stamp. So those two books right there, they could really put you closer to that 30 grand. It could make the whole collection worth it. But in this case, I think it would put us about $5,000 in value in those two books after getting them pressed, cleaned, and graded. So the rest of the books that were worth grading, say there was about 300, two short boxes, The grading fees alone is about $12,000. Okay, it's a huge chunk of change. It's totally worth it if it's worth it. But there's also a ton of risk involved in this. This particular collector sourced these books from all over, from cons, from whatnot, from eBay, you name it. He bought books everywhere. And when I asked him how comfortable he was with grading, he said he wasn't comfortable with grading at all. And then the fact that the 181 was missing the Marvel value stamp, I thought there's some risk with those books. Like, that's different than somebody who really is in tune with grading, knows how to check for restoration, only buys from reputable companies. Then that set is a lot less risk than this one. So I just couldn't justify getting to the $30,000 mark. After you have all those books pressed, clean, and graded, invest the additional $12,000. Now you have 8,500 other raw books. And, you know, a lot of it was stuff that was just going to be incredibly difficult to move. One long box, for example, was all 12-cent Charlatan. And 12-cent Charlatan books, incredibly difficult to move. They're going to take a long time. I mean, I can't do like a 12-cent Charlatan whatnot show. I don't think anyways. And it's just a massive amount of time invested in 8,500 raw books. So it just didn't work for me to get to that $30,000 mark. Now, I was being conservative in, you know, valuing these books because you have to be conservative to protect yourself. But maybe if this person had got those 300 books that were worth graded, and I'm able to look up the values of all those books and see that, oh, wow, those graded books alone get us to $50,000. And then we have the 8,500 other raw books. Now, even if that person invested the $12,000 in getting those books graded, now I'm, you know, easily able to offer $30,000 or $40,000 for that collection. You know, I'm just giving rough numbers here, but this is an example of a collection where you absolutely should get the books that are worth grading graded if you're looking to move the entire collection. Now let's talk about another collection where they did the opposite. They got a ton of books graded that had no business getting graded. So it was a total of about 600 slabs, and about 200 to 300 of those 600 slabs were books that were maybe worth the cost of grading fees alone, maybe worth $25. A lot of them were worth $10. We're talking about Bronze and Copper Age books that were like 8.0s, 8.5s, 9.0s, that even the 9.8 is borderline worth getting graded. And so now you have an 8.0 and it's worth like $15, $20. So this person made a massive mistake. I don't know what happened here. Maybe it was their childhood collection and they decided to get everything graded, and that's a massive mistake because you end up with 200 or 300 slabs that don't even make up for the cost that you spent to get them graded. And not only was it the grading fees, but they also had them pressed and cleaned, and they had the shipping, so they're way far in the red with these books. And the bigger problem is they're incredibly difficult to move. I mean, it's going to be incredibly difficult to find anyone that's willing to take them. So for this collection, I offered $46,000, which was about 60% of FMV. There was some nice stuff in there, nothing huge. I think the biggest book was like a $600 book. And they turned it down. They said that, you know, they had $35,000 into the grading fees alone. I understand that, but that doesn't have any effect on the resale value of those books. So anyways, they walked away, and this was just an example of getting books graded that had no business being graded. Unless it was your childhood personal collection and you wanted them graded for yourself, that's fine. But if you're going to resell them, you have to crunch the numbers, and the numbers have to work. So that's it, guys. Don't forget to check out those links in the description for more detailed information about this process. Don't forget we have that monthly giveaway here on the YouTube channel. If you subscribe, comment, and like, you're entered to win a free slab each and every month. And if you sign up for the newsletter at brycecomics.com, you're also entered to win a free slab. You get first access to mystery boxes and new inventory. Use code COLLECT10 for 10% off all in-stock items. Check me out on Instagram for Trades for Grails, other fresh content over there. And lastly, on Whatnot, link in the description for $15 towards your first purchase. Thank you as always for sticking with me to the end of the video. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Bryce Comics.